Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne. This is a fully independent podcast. Lend your support, patreon.com/aroundtheempire, rockfin.com/aroundtheempire, or paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Also, please like, share, and subscribe. This is a Swapcast between Around the Empire and Geopolitics and Empire. Hrvoje and I got together for a wide-ranging discussion about the Great Game, the Great Reset, the pandemic lockdowns and other responses, restrictions, the ramping up of hostilities with Russia and China, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the sudden permission to speak about the lab leak theory. We recorded this on June 7th, 2021. But I guess the two big questions for me right now are, I'm worried about the Great Reset aspect to this, the agenda that is now openly out there. Why anybody's getting banned for talking about it when it's right, it's published in the World Economic Forum site is pretty crazy. And I guess the other thing, the question's been on my mind lately, which I think will stir up a lot of other conversation, is that why is it suddenly okay to talk about the lab leak theory when a year ago people were getting banned for it and careers threatened and everything else? And then, of course, more in the it's all involved with geopolitics, but more in the geopolitics arena, we have this upcoming NATO summit, and the targets Russia and China, but it seems like the pressure on China has ramped up taken to another level recently, and maybe related to the whole lab leak theory, maybe not. I don't really even know. So I think that with those threads, we could have an interesting conversation. Maybe you have some other ideas what we should talk about.
No, I mean, that's largely it.
So that's what's on everybody's mind, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you notice the trend, I've been talking a lot about Great Reset because, as you said, I think at least a lot of the people who know what's going on or who are like thinking with their brains, apart from the people who don't care about beyond what's in their daily lives, they can see the threat of the Great Reset. And it's really like pressing. Because I was living in Kazakhstan for 3 years, and I'm still working there virtually from here and for another week. And they just installed the vaccine app, the medical passport, which is the Chinese social credit system. And you cannot go. I was talking to a teenage student who said, you cannot enter the cafes where I used to go freely in Kazakhstan. You can't go into a cafe without a smartphone, without the app, without having taken a test or a vaccine, that's proven by the app. And even you get a green status, yellow or red. And the article from the government said even that you might even get a red status and not be told why, like arbitrarily, and that's it. And that's the social credit system. And they're going to link it up to your social media, bank account, and it's total control system. If you're going to be quantified, and then you'll be limited if you don't do things in travel. I've already met on the train when I was in Kazakhstan an older man who was a labor activist. I asked him, he was coming from a long distance, and I had asked him, why didn't you take the plane? You're going like 50 hours on the train. And he's like, the government blacklisted me from flying. So it's, this people don't, and I just got a few days ago, CJ Hopkins.
I know the name, and I read some of his stuff again pretty recently. Yeah.
So he kept using the Nazi Aachen pass as like his metaphor for what's going on, and I actually got some from an antique dealer for the 1938.
Oh, really?
Actually, I got a couple of them. One for the whole family, like as a joke, to educate people. Like this is in the Nazi times to show your Aryan background, like basically your biological purity. What is the vaccine passport except to, again, it's like to show your vaccine I mean, your biological purity, right? That you took
Your
the
health
vaccine,
purity,
your
yeah.
health purity, and then those who haven't, they don't have access now. They're being separated in two parts of society. That's just like what the Nazis did. So like, here's my vaccine passport, right? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned recently, I listened to, like I said, I listened to a bunch of your podcasts over the weekend, and I have listened to a number of them in the past. And a whole bunch of people, at least three different people, had said, "Oh, you got to watch The Man in the High Castle. You got to watch that, dystopian sci-fi series on Amazon Prime." And I was like, I hardly have any time to. I don't read much fiction or watch much fiction at all anymore. But I was laid up for a while a couple weeks ago, and so I thought, all right, let me watch that finally. Whoa, was this a bad time to watch that? Uh, because there you have, for anybody who's not familiar with it, I mean, I won't do spoilers or anything, but it's an alternative history, right? Alternative outcome to World War II. And everybody knows that. That's not a spoiler, right? And so the United States is split between the control of the Nazis and the Japanese with this neutral zone in the middle. And so you see on camera, you see Nazi America played out in the middle of like all this great reset stuff and this fear of what's going to happen. And I tell you, it was pretty disturbing.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite shows. I just haven't seen the last season. So.
Oh, really? Oh, I won't tell. I won't say anything. I wouldn't do a spoiler anyway, but yeah. So I would say it's a bad time to watch it, but I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's a good time to watch it, but be prepared to lose a little sleep. I think. What did you find it to be at all? Like, what did you think about that? You mentioned it, but you didn't really say much about what you thought about it.
Of Man in the High Castle.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just because generally I like dystopia and science fiction. Since I was a kid, and I'm a conservative Christian, so I believe in the Bible, and for me it kind of like melds the dystopian kind of like the prophecy of the Bible can down the line are pretty dystopian, and that kind of melds with the sci-fi dystopian genre, and then what's actually happening. It's like they're mirroring each other, what's happening in real life, and it's like we're all going down that road. And so that was one of the reasons I like Philip Dick, right? The guy who
Philip K. Dick,
Blade Runner, right? Yeah,
right. I've seen some of his films, but somewhere for some reason I didn't read his books. I don't know why. I was always a voracious reader, but let me just find this. I noted a couple of things that I thought were interesting about the vaccine passport, quote unquote, which some people are now saying, oh, maybe they think the name of it is the problem. The branding of it is the problem, not the whole idea of it. They're like, maybe we should have never called it a passport to begin with. But kind of two interesting things I've seen. One, before I forget, there's an article, I believe it's in Voice of America today. Maybe I even saw it on your Twitter feed. Now, well, June 4th, U.S. mulls launching the digital dollar. This has to be the third or fourth announcement of such a thing that I've seen. Like, when are they going to actually do it? Like, is this a trial balloon every time? I mean, I don't know. And of course, the reason why we bring this up is that, as you mentioned, in Kazakhstan, they seem to have gone from nothing to a full-fledged social credit system with their health passport thing. And once you tie the dollar into that, then you could cut off people's access to their own money, right? This is really serious stuff. Is that the case with I don't know much about the, I hear about the Chinese social credit system, but I don't actually know that much about it.
Well, I mean, if you do the research, you can see it's basically like living in a video game. I'm also a big gamer, or I used to when I had more time. And just imagine yourself living in a video game where you get points or you lose points, and basically you get privileges or lose privileges based on those points. So in China, if you do things that the government wants you, it's basically you're submitting to the ideology of the government. And if you do what they say, you'll get points and you'll get privileges.
Do you level up?
You level up, but then basically, yeah, there's like you can't travel, you can't get good jobs, or maybe some cases you can't get jobs at all. You can't go to university. And I did the interview. I mean, a year ago. I mean, I saw this from the beginning in June 2020 with Edwin Black, the Jewish historian, who researched the nexus between the Nazis and the American eugenicists. You know, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford. IBM, and he talks about the system as well. He says this is the algorithm ghetto, and you become a non-entity, a zombie. And I forgot to mention, I was talking to the young people in Kazakhstan. Young people today don't care. They accept this, using these codes to enter. They see it as normal. And I'm trying to tell them, like, you know, knowing the history, knowing where it's going now and how bad it will get, they don't care. And it's unbelievable because we already see people being locked out of this system in the West. Here's an example. Like, there's a guy on the right. He's this YouTuber called Nick Fuentes. You know, whatever you think about him, he's from Illinois, where I'm originally from. He attended the Trump rally on January 6th. He never went into the Capitol. He was just there at the rally. He didn't do anything wrong. So he was deplatformed from almost all social media. I think they shut down a bank account of his, and now he can't fly in America on a no-fly list. So, I mean, I don't care who you are. I mean, if you're left or right, I wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
Just for being in the vicinity, right? Or being at the rally?
But I feel that's just merely the pretext. You know, I'm forgetting now. I think Biden, they're passing these new domestic terror laws. I think Glenn Greenwald was recently talking about this, that now it doesn't matter. The whole point is that they'll be able to label you. Nils Melzner, the UN special reporter guy, he just posted a very important post yesterday or today.
He was saying a UN torture rapporteur. He stood up for Julian Assange. That's who we're referring to.
Yeah, he just posted. Switzerland is now expanding their definition of terrorism, which can now cover political dissent. So any type of anything that can be viewed as like dissent, what is usually normal and healthy in a democracy, can now be declared terrorism. So then link that again to your social credit system. So for me, I've always known that this has always been their end game. And so now they're getting there. And so they're building the social credit system. They're changing the laws, definitions of terrorism, domestic terror laws. So they're building this apparatus piece by piece. And so if you're left or right, it doesn't matter who, or independent or some certain religion, you go against the system, the establishment, you'll just be turned off. And you literally won't be able to buy food, especially if we're cashless, like you say, with the digital currency.
With the Chinese social credit score, is currency tied into that? Or is it tied into it yet?
Well, they're not there yet, but I think, as they say in China, few people use cash, at least in the big cities. So it's mostly, they're more advanced than I think the rest of the world, where they're all just using their apps, and you can't even use cash in some parts of China. And so now they're coming out with the digital yuan, which is, I think, because I think these things are not that easy as well. So it's taking the US and China time to build the technology to roll out these systems. But I think eventually, it's going to link. Like Robert Kennedy was saying, he was saying, imagine the future where we have drones in the cashless society, and we have the lockdowns, and you go to the beach, you can't handle the lockdown anymore, for example, and you want to go to the beach. The drone spies you at the beach. And because we're in the cashless society and surveillance society, it will automatically deduct, the $100 or $500 fine from your account immediately. There's no fine or anything. It's just immediately deducted. Maybe you get an email notification. Oh, you just got the fine and we deducted it. That's that system. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah, we've already had hints of that with the cameras on the traffic lights that automatically give you a ticket we could, ours, we got rid of ours, but some places still have them, but it caused such an uproar. They just flash the camera just flashes as you're going, if the light turns yellow and you're caught in the middle of the intersection, and then you just get issued a ticket, and it just shows up in your mail. They couldn't take the money yet, but I'm sure if they could have, they would have. um, but yeah, there was another example that has now slipped my mind, but um, with the vaccine passport, though, I saw a couple things I thought were interesting today in two different ways. Like, one of them is sort of a rant from Brookings Institution from June 4th. And it's someone named Kelly Kennedy, who I think is mainly a researcher, but this Dr. Leanna Wen, who is always on CNN, and she's a Rhodes Scholar. She's I don't know, she's in a bunch of different organizations. Um, I could look up and see exactly what she is. Emergency physician, a visiting professor, uh, George Washington, non-resident senior fellow at Brookings, of course, contributing columnist, Washington Post, CNN medical analyst, wrote some books, and she was Baltimore's health commissioner, and she went to Oxford and Washington University. And it says, oh yeah, she's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Somewhere in here it says she's a Rhodes Scholar too. So anyway, they write an article, and it's a rant basically saying how the Biden administration can mitigate the consequences of the CDC's mask guidelines. So they're furious that the CDC issued the new mask guidelines. Um, like in New Jersey, here we're one of the hot spot states, and when the CDC new mask guidelines came out, um, Murphy, who's very much like Cuomo, said, "Well, not here. We're going to keep our mask guidelines." Well, even he just kind of wiped out almost all of the pandemic lockdown restrictions have been now lifted, except there are still some, like in the school, kids still have to wear masks, things like that. So anyway, they're very angry that the CDC went ahead and made that change to the mask um, restrictions on, I guess it was on May 31st or something, which is the beginning of summer here, right? As you know, this is when uh, the summer business starts. Certainly in this state, the shore business is really big deal and really important. But anyway, they're very angry. They're kind of like saying the CDC is a scientific institution. They're not policymakers, and they say although many celebrated the prospect of a return to normal life, others cautioned that relaxing mask recommendations when only 36% of the country was fully vaccinated was premature. And they're saying there are steps the CDC and the Biden administration can take to mitigate the direct and indirect consequences of the new guidance. Then they go through what their recommendations are. They say first, they can help accelerate the rollout of vaccine verification nationwide, and that's their new name for. Second, the administration, together with the CDC, can support cities, states, and businessmen that continue to require mask wearing and other protective measures. Third, they can issue additional guidance for workplace and other settings. They said they're undermining OSHA, that OSHA was, trying to keep some mask rules in. And they're basically saying the CDC overstepped their bounds, as if the Biden administration didn't have anything to do with that. And they say, finally, the White House should clarify the role of the CDC as a scientific institution that cannot be the sole decision-making entity in complex policy decisions. So they're kind of suggesting that the CDC should have to consult with some other institutions before they even put out their guidelines, like add another level of bureaucracy. And they say a well thought out policy would have acknowledged the need for individuals to show proof of vaccination in order to relax protective measures. For instance, EU member states have begun requiring digital green certificates of vaccination status for travel within the bloc. And some music and sports venues have begun requiring proof. Let me skim through a little bit. And then they talk about the the New York Excelsior pass. And they say such a policy would have contemplated target community vaccination rates, say 70% of the adult population with at least one dose, before they would reopen. And so anyway, they really go off on this. And in their conclusion, they say the CDC's guidance has signaled the end of the pandemic for many in the US, but this is a premature declaration of victory. They say the window of opportunity to tie reopening policy to vaccination has closed. So they're regretting that. We can no longer, use all these restrictions to urge people to get the vaccine. Then they say the CDC and the Biden administration should act immediately to mitigate the risks resulting from the new mask guidelines. The vaccinated may be well protected from the virus, but we cannot overlook our obligation to protect those who do not yet have immunity or waver in our commitment to end this pandemic once and for all. So I was very surprised to see that, because at the same time, and this is today, and The Hill published an op-ed saying COVID vaccine passports pose more questions than answers. But listen to the first paragraph. In Hollywood movies of a certain vintage, the Nazi functionary barks at a frightened citizen, "May we see your papers?" as he demands production of an identification card. ID cards are a hallmark of a police state, so you get the vibe where they're going with this. I don't think I'd seen that kind of thing published in something like The Hill for quite a while. One more surprising thing from about a week ago. Remember how they were holding up the Israel as the example, as the model state, because they had it was called the Green Pass, wasn't it? It was called a Green Pass. Well, apparently Israel just ditched it. They got rid of it. And so there's this article on the Spectator talking about how they got rid of it and how that wasn't really enforced very well anyway. But the big takeaway from this article was that the scaremongers are wrong. They were wrong. It was never a method of social control, which is just another twisted thing. And then one last thing was Ocean County, California, the big, somewhat conservative or very conservative part of California, in Southern California. Yeah. So they were going to implement some kind of QR code vaccine passport type app for your phone. And they had 500 people show up at their whatever county meeting. They had 700 people sign up to publicly comment about it. And lots of them did get up to the podium and talk about it. And the, whatever they are, commissioners or whatever, voted against the implementation of this program. This was back in May. It seems to have, it's taken a turn, whereas I don't know if they are just going to ditch this whole idea. I don't know what's going on,
I doubt it. I don't trust these people. I think these people are psychopaths and they play games. And, you're mentioning Brookings and CDC. I think they're both part of the establishment, right? Brookings, sometimes maybe they play good cop, bad cop. Maybe they're different. Or it was
a personal disagreement with somebody. I don't know.
Yeah, that as well. And I was talking with my last podcast with Michael Rechenwald, who wrote the book Google Archipelago, where he talks about some of this stuff. And it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? So maybe they got so much pushback from people, they had to kind of relent for a moment, but then they'll be trying again, maybe another way. But like I said, we're seeing in Kazakhstan now the social credit system come in. We're seeing it, and you mentioned in the EU, right? So maybe they stopped in Israel for now, but it's going forward in the EU. And if that functions, then Israel will say, well, look, everyone else is doing it. So now we got to try it again. Maybe a different version of the app. It's like a software program,
Or
right? Like
rebrand it, give it a new name, like the terrorist groups in Syria.
There you go. Exactly. Al Qaeda, ISIS, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But that's interesting because Kazakhstan, so you lived there for some period of time, right? Now, what's it like to live in there? How much influence does Russia still have on that country? I just saw something today. This actually I think did come from your Twitter feed, where Kazakhstan basically gave Russia the middle finger when they wanted to have sort of a collective response, pushback against the Russian sanctions. And Kazakhstan's like, sorry, no.
yeah. So Russia was telling, so they're trying to create the Eurasian Union, which is basically like the EU, which for me these are globalist projects, because the European Union for me is based on. I'm speaking as an EU citizen, as a Croat now, and it's a globalist ideology, because its ultimate goal is world domination, a global government, because they want to create the regional unions as the structure for this world government. And so Eurasian Union, which Russia and these other countries are trying to create, which would include Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and so, as you said, Russia said, look, they're sanctioning us, Russia. Can you guys all agree collectively to return sanction them? And as you said, Kazakhstan said no, because Kazakhstan's trying to play like all sides. They have a multi-vector foreign policy, so they want to be on good terms with China, Russia, and USA.
Well,
There's
that's
a lot of
smart, right?
Well, I guess, yeah, that's the most logical thing. You would do it like as an individual, right?
Yeah.
If you were making deals with three, you had three neighbors or something, and you want to be on good terms with everyone, right?
Particularly if they're fighting with each other and hurting each other in some way. Yeah. I mean, that's called the non-aligned position, right? For years, for, I don't know, century, there have been people who have tried to take the non-aligned position, and we always seem to angle them. Yeah, it does. We pressure them, and sometimes to a very large extent. It's not an acceptable position from an empire perspective, right? I just saw where NATO is trying to pull Ireland in now, which is shocking.
I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah. I think they want them to at least be like, there are all kinds of things. You could be a full NATO member, but you can also be, there are all these sort of little different ways you can kind of be NATO partners, like even Colombia is now, right? So I don't know how they.
Yeah, they're a partner. I've always viewed, since forever, having studied, given my worldview and global governance, this goal of global government, NATO would be like the world police for the UN. And you just see it keep expanding. Like you said, the original purpose has been fulfilled, right? The Soviet Union, Cold War. There's no more purpose for it. What if that wasn't really its main goal? What if it has always been to become this global cop, right? For the world government, and you see it expanding with Colombia as a global part. I think is the first global partner in Latin America. They want to add Brazil. There's all these columns coming out talking about India, trying to get India
in NATO.
Yeah, well, they're talking about. There was a recent article I posted it on my social media where they're discussing. Not in the near term, but
yeah,
they're putting these ideas out, and so yeah, and they want to add. They just want to keep adding countries.
Eventually, till it becomes, they're not finished till it's everybody but Russia, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, well, so they have this big summit coming up. I'm taking us off topic a little bit, and I was just trying to skim through. It's painful, but I try to read the speeches or listen to the speeches of that Stoltenberg guy and whatever, a few things at least. And they rip Russia, left, right, rip it apart. And then they say that China is not our adversary. Well, they rip China too. They say that they don't share our values, but they're not our adversary, which is very curious. And I know I mentioned this to you before we as we were arranging this. And one of your, I apologize if I'm taking us off to another topic again, and you wanted to say more about.
I think you're talking about Denny Rancourt, no?
Yeah, and so, and I heard in one, at least one of yours, you saying like, well, in terms of this, great reset and globalism project or whatever, a much longer term project, where are Russia and China? I mean, some of my very pro-Russian or pro-Chinese um, friends seem to take the position that Russia and China are resisting this kind of thing, that they are not going to go along with any globalist project, and that they're pushing back against the Great Reset. And maybe that's true. I mean, some people who I discussed the Middle East with, and they think um, that China is part of the resistance, and I'm just not confident of that. I'm pretty confused about where they stand. Are they just going along with these things, just not to make waves? But particularly in the pandemic response, it looked like a pretty unified project. So I'm like, I don't know. But your guest provided the kind of the first plausible thing that seemed logical to me by saying, and correct me if I'm not stating his position correctly, but he says, well, basically, as part of when you try to bring another partner, particularly one that's big, worth investing some time and effort into into the empire, um, you try to create a top 10%. You try to co-opt, make some people really wealthy, and then they sell out their country and they become part of the gang. And that this was the approach taken with China, but it in the end didn't really work. And now that's why they're sort of turning against China, and maybe could explain the latest sort of, maybe they've given up on them. I mean, certainly in the 90s, we saw with the Russian oligarchs, basically the way they tried to do regime change or whatever to remake Russia, and try with the idea of breaking it up, or at least that's what Brzezinski wanted to do. They created these oligarchs, just a fairly small amount of people who had control over all the big state industries, and then um, foreigners were able to buy into it. And at some point, Putin is given credit for sort of putting a stop to that practice and for getting the oligarchs under control. Allegedly, he pulled them together and said, you could get as rich as you want, but don't meddle with the state business, that kind of thing. And so I often wonder, what's going on. There's all these Chinese billionaires now too. Was the same tactic tried that sort of first succeeded and then backfired with Russia? Did they take the same approach with China? Or then you hear one of the Rockefellers saying that, well, look at China, look at our project in China. It's a model country. This is the way we should all operate. And you see a sort of the ideas of moving toward a social credit system and all that. You see people like Bill Gates saying, well, the reason why the response to this pandemic failed is because we have individual rights and things like that. And other people sort of envious of China and the things that they can do because they're such an authoritarian country. So it's very confusing to try to really understand what's going on. And I thought your guest had an interesting theory on that.
Yeah, I think Rancor, he's great, and so many things, and I think ultimately, collectively, like no one knows for certain 100% everything, and all we can kind of do is put our fingers out into the ether. And I think I would personally kind of disagree with him on that point. I think it could be more because he was saying, right, that Russia and China are retaining their sovereignty and they don't want to join this global government, Great Reset, that's largely from, coming from Europe, right? Davos and, whatever city in London, US. And
the old monarchs or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel maybe part of it could be, I see that they're all in on it to different degrees of, all of the factions, power centers in all the countries. Maybe Russia and China don't want to join in as subordinates, right? That could be where the struggle is, which would make sense. Again, if you put yourself, if you're joining some club or group and they tell you, no, you have to be subordinate, maybe that's part of the struggle. And others that I have interviewed recently, again, I interviewed the Peruvian research professor who's pretty popular and very popular in the Spanish language, Miklos Lucas. He was saying that the West has long ago made inroads into China. He was talking about Microsoft and Google and Bill Gates having an audience with like Xi Jinping, which like no one gets to do, and like all of these. That basically there is this deal now with the Great Reset people in China. Michael Rechnewald, my last interview, this professor was saying that he thinks they're networking together all of the nations, and they're doing it through these public-private partnerships, the international organizations, the regional unions, corporations, NGOs, academia, think tanks, institutes. So they're just kind of slowly networking everyone together. And, someone I follow on Twitter they're a Marxist. I'm not a Marxist, but they're one of the few people which I think they're nailing it in regards to this Great Reset aspect that you're talking about. I think they're Russian. I'm not sure. They keep saying that like a lot of Russia's policies now are Great Reset policies. Like in education, they're like, they today they just published an article saying in Russia now for the first time they're going to be putting in supermarkets all this new food that's made from fly larvae, insects, which is Klaus Schwab's you will eat the bugs, right? And so Russia's doing the whole insect food stuff. They're rolling out for education the whole fourth industrial revolution model. The article was saying they're going to be closing down more schools and rolling out remote learning. They're doing that in Russia, right? The Prime Minister Mishustin was attending the World Economic Forum's Cyber Polygon, and with the Russian Spare Bank. Like it seems like a lot of the policies in Russia are going along with the Great Reset. So you can kind of see it in the actions as well as as we're talking about in China. So I feel that they're in on it. Maybe there's certain factions that are fighting. They don't want to be subordinate to the West. Someone also brought up the point, the traditional values that are held, like in Russia, that are traditional values, don't accept transgenderism or homosexuality and these things. And so that could be a point of contention. And so I view at some point, by hook or by crook, they're all going to come together somehow.
I mean, well, then what's the war going to be about? Why, or is that just a way to gin up, to justify big military budgets and to prop up these military, giant military apparati, whatever. What is the plural apparatus?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's a good. Well, if you think about war, always leads to the revolutions in technology. Look what World War I and II did. So think about that. That can be the catalyst to create these, World War III, to create these technologies that they're going to then use to further centralize global control. As well, the wars are used to remake entire swaths of the Earth's societies, economic structures. The Marshall Plan in Europe, right? The EU came out of World War II, the UN. So there can be new global governance structures that will cement further global power at the global level. Boris Johnson, just last week, I was just like I wanted to vomit. This week he was saying we need to create a system of global surveillance for he literally said he's like for pandemics. Like, are you kidding me? What? It's for us. I know you're lying, and I know that you know that I know. Like it's like, come on, I don't know how these people sleep at night. I don't know how they look at themselves in the mirror every day. It's horrible what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm laughing, but it's not funny at all. Yeah, I mean that. A lot of people say so. It's constantly on the minds of anybody who's in the war and foreign policy indie media circles. Is there going to be a war? We're going to have another war. And a lot of people still think that the idea that there'll be another world war is crazy. Personally, I think the idea that we would go to war with China is completely nuts. When you're here, I don't know how much you've been here lately, but you go to a store and everything's made in China. If we go to war with China, I would think certainly the supplies are going to cut off, and we're going to be just stranded in so many ways, or at least have to find new suppliers of other things. But the thing that worries me the most is knowing what world wars have been used for or have resulted in the past. These massive system-wide or global changes, the kinds of changes that couldn't be done any other way. I don't know. Or whether you want to sort of hide the hand that planned these changes for long, long periods of time, and you want to make it look like for some other reason was this done, some noble reason in the end. Just like this pandemic, there are a lot of people saying it's a planned remodeling, destruction, demolition, or whatever of the financial system.
I cannot see that on any other way. Like, I thought of this example today. Like, okay, let's take the bubonic plague, from almost a millennia ago, and it's like, we didn't see the Holy Roman Empire running bubonic plague simulations, right? Well, so it's like, you can count. You can go back to 2017 SPARS pandemic simulation that talks about 2020, 2025 pandemic. And then today, someone just brought to my attention again a 2010 National Intelligence Council EU report, global governance report forecasting 2025. And I found on page 37, it was saying, in the summer of 2021, a pandemic hits, everything's shut down. I can't fly. They're trying to get out emergency vaccines. It's like, then you had the Rockefeller report in 2010. And then you had half a dozen, 2018, you had Clade X simulation of influenza-like disease. I looked up the term clade. It was created by eugenicist Julian Huxley, invented the word clade in the 1800s, which signifies a species breaking into two, like a branch. So think of like an elite species and the inferiors. Why would they use eugenicist term clade X for 2008's influenza-like coronavirus-like and then you had 2019, Crimson Contagion, Urban Outbreak, Event 201, which specifically ran a coronavirus simulation. Yeah. And then the Chinese in September in Wuhan, and a few people don't know this, but Whitney Webb, you can find the article in Chinese and then Google translate it. September 2019, the Wuhan airport did a simulation of a coronavirus breaking out in the airport.
When was that again?
In September of 2019.
2019.
In Wuhan. And that's right before Event 1 in October 2019. And then
3 weeks before, yeah.
And then 3 months before the official coronavirus pandemic. So for me, the one fact is this was planned. And then the question becomes, was it a biological weapon? And some people are saying, I'm not ruling this out. My running two theories was that it was a bioweapon, gain of function, light bioweapon, still doesn't qualify as a pandemic because the mortality rate doesn't bring us anywhere near pandemic levels, as Denis Rancourt talks about and others. Or that maybe they just, there never was a virus and they just implemented these some people are saying these deadly hospital protocols, which they used on adults and elderly in some places, which effectively they basically killed a bunch of old people and used that as like the pretext, false flag pretext, to run the narrative, the myth of this, kind of like, what they've done with 9/11 and these sorts of things, like and so, and as well as the lockdown policies that created higher rates of suicide, alcoholism, people dying from cancer. I mean, I know people who couldn't my uncle got cancer and he couldn't go for months to get treatment. I mean, he's doing okay now, but imagine there's a lot of people that just died from the lockdown policies as well as the hospital protocols. So I can see both plausible. So I don't know. There's people that say, no, there's no bioweapon. There's no, I don't know. Can you say that for sure? Can anyone say anything for sure? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and again, as I was mentioning to you before, the other baffling thing is nothing has changed, and there's not a whole lot of new information or anything. But suddenly, all these journalists are having epiphanies on Medium, and and Facebook says, okay, we won't ban you for talking about a lab leak theory anymore. And suddenly everybody who's mocking anyone who even mentioned such a possibility a year ago, mocking as in like, trying to shut you up or worse, people are getting banned for it. Now all of a sudden it's nobody can shut up about it. Everybody's talking about it. How did that happen overnight? It wasn't some intelligence report like the Wall Street Journal claims, because even that information was out before. That wasn't new.
I mean, that's suspicious, isn't it? I mean, it makes me think of the time when General Michael Flynn was with Mehdi Hassan, I think, on Al Jazeera.
Yeah,
and he said,
I know what you're talking about.
And he said that the Obama administration, I mean, every administration was doing this, but that the Obama administration intentionally was supporting ISIS, right? And then we had the document, I forget which agency published it, Department of Defense.
2012 DIA, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, the document that basically says, yeah, we're supporting ISIS, but that wasn't all over the news, right?
No.
So why then is this again?
He was
makes
targeted
you think,
for that. I would say they never forgave him for that. He ended up. Was that after he got fired or before?
No, that was years before.
Yeah. Well, he didn't last very long, and then he was specifically targeted. They did not want him being part of any government. Yeah. So totally different kind of reaction. You're right.
But this makes me think, since you're talking about this, so I think it could be, again, it relates back to China, and maybe they do, maybe there are factions that want a war with China. I think Daniel Ellsberg recently released some old documents that he had that said in 1958 there were some factions in the US who wanted nuclear war with China in the 50s. And we know this often throughout history. General MacArthur, I think during the Korean War, I'm not sure, wanted nuclear war. And so, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Joint Chiefs around Kennedy, I mean, there are these psychopaths pushing for war that people don't understand, that these people don't think like us. They'll blow up the world. They'll watch the world burn. And so I found an article. So the World Socialist website just published an article bringing up this point that on May 23rd, so just a few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal published an article titled "Intelligence on Sick Staff at Wuhan Lab Fuels Debate on COVID-19 Origin," citing unnamed current and former officials. So they're trying to now, make the case, China did this bioweapon. The author of that article was Michael R. Gordon, the same man who, together with Judith Miller, wrote the September 2002 article falsely asserting that Iraqi President Saddam Hussein was seeking to build a nuclear weapon. And then Bloomberg, just a few days ago on June 4th, writes, quote, "If the COVID virus does turn out to have escaped from a Wuhan lab, even by accident, the world will erupt in fury. The pressure to do something about it, to find a way to punish China for its negligence and its cover-up, will be intense." I mean, that just sounds like a setup again, whether you want Gulf of Tonkin 1964 Vietnam or, Iraq War WMDs. That sounds like the same script to
Yeah,
me.
well, some of the same people, the whole anthrax thing, trying to say that it was, they try to blame that on Iraq too, and some of the same people who did the Dark Winter exercises, the same kind of simulations that I don't know. Doesn't seem like those played out the way they were supposed to, but some of that, they're literally some of the same people involved in. Certain they were in the Trump administration. I don't know where they are right now. Whitney Webb's done a lot of work on that too. The Cadlick, and a bunch of other names. Who you said that was Bloomberg, the one that you just
This last piece was from Bloomberg, yeah, just 3 days ago.
and was that Gordon or was that who wrote that?
It was the Bloomberg staff
editorial
writer. Yeah,
Okay.
staff, someone from Bloomberg.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm truly baffled on this. I don't even have that many like possibilities other than some. I mean, I have been thinking about it a lot. Like, were they trying to get ahead of something? Is there some information that's going to come out? There was that Vanity Fair article where, but that just seems to be sort of along the same lines. They're just saying, oh yeah, there were all these scientists who really wanted to say something, but they were pressured so much that they didn't. Because that's the other disgrace, is just the amount of professionals who there were professionals who did try to speak out and got slammed down, but so many that didn't. But I don't really know. I can only think that, I don't know, is China going to reveal something? Why would they do this? Why did this suddenly happen? I just don't.
Me neither.
I mean,
they
heard
were
a good
uh-huh.
idea yet.
I mean, they were, the U.S. and China were working together. U.S. was financing the lab in Wuhan. That's a fact. I mean, I still get people. We were talking about the social credit score earlier, especially the young people. There's some young people who were my students where I taught. They just constantly mock me on social media, right? It's like the young people buy all the narratives. They can't think for themselves. They don't know history. They don't know critical thinking. They just appeal to authority. And a lot of them are going into the medical field and studying science. So all they think is important is the white coat, the official agency or
Status,
institution.
yeah.
And I mean, these are all facts that we're talking about. And I always post official sources for my stories. I don't post any stuff from weird forums or anything. Everything I'm talking about is from official sources. And I think there will be war with. I mean, I think there will be war in history. We've always had war. We've never had a period, without war. I've had experts on saying that there will be war again. I spoke to, I'm forgetting his name. He wrote the book on space. Brandon, I can't forget his name. He has but he was saying that he thinks war could be highly possible with China in the he says the high point would be 2025, 6, 7, getting closer to 2030. He says if we pass that period without war, then maybe there won't be a war. I talked to Australian Special Forces Ricardo Bossi, who thinks that war is inevitable. And so I think it's human nature. I think there will be some kind of conflict. Maybe they'll be using more drones and stuff, killer robots out in the fields. I don't know.
Or biowarfare or chemical warfare. Already it's operating sort of under the guise of biodefense, so if you have a problem where wars with hundreds of thousands of troops on the ground don't work anymore, if you're desperate, I mean, I think any of it's possible. It's very scary. I guess it was when the latest escalation with Ukraine, when it looked like, there were troops coming to the borders and things like that. I thought it was coming. I thought something was going to happen, and maybe it's been averted for right now, but I don't know. Biden just backed off on the Nord Stream sanctions, but I'm not sure how effective they were anyway. And if anyone influenced that, I would think it would be Germany, I think the industrialists in Germany are the ones who have the most influence over that situation. So, how significant is that? What are they even going to talk about in this summit that they have coming up next week? I guess it is. There was a big article in the New York Times. Not that I believe the things that I read in the New York Times, but there's always something that can be gotten from it. It has. I have a whole different way of reading the media articles now, and it was this big thing about how we're leaving Afghanistan, and the CIA is scrambling now to uh, relocate themselves or whatever to have security, or for the American military to find some other places outside of Afghanistan to establish some new bases. And they were saying that the old Soviet states, like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, whatever, Tajikistan, that they would really like to establish some bases there because they think that they would meddle with the CIA operations less than Pakistan would, because Pakistan sort of like said, all drone strikes, approval has to go through us because of just the horrible situation that was created there. So anyway, they would like to put bases in one of the stand countries, but they're saying that Putin will not be happy with that. He'll oppose it, and at the very least, he'll drag it out. It'll take way too long to do it, and they're in a big hurry. Why they're in a big hurry, I'm not sure. They've been in those peace talks with the Taliban for what, 2 years now in Doha, something like that. But they also said that the withdrawal is going to happen even before Biden's, September 11th stunt. That they may be out in a couple of weeks. They might be out by the beginning or middle of July. All of them pulled out.
I just read today, supposedly half half of the troops are out of Afghanistan, and I think it's to encircle Russia and China, right? Encircle Russia, the Belt and Road, right?
Interfere with the Belt and Road, yeah.
Interfere, neutralize. I was telling friends in Kazakhstan, back three. So in Kazakhstan, it's almost nothing happens in Kazakhstan. It's very peaceful. It's one of the most safest countries, like compared to Mexico, or even in the U.S. The first time I stared down the barrel of a gun was in Chicago. So compared to that, Kazakhstan is, you don't have to worry in general. But they had a terrorist attack like in 2016, I think, in some part of Kazakhstan. Could have been a false flag. Nobody knows. My concern, Russians have been talking about this. If we know who finances Al Qaeda and ISIS, it's largely the West, right? I believe international terrorism doesn't really exist. That it's largely, the Saudis, the Qataris, Israelis, Americans, Europeans financing it. I always use quotes like one Iraqi general who said, if the West stopped financing ISIS, tomorrow there would be no ISIS in Iraq. We've had the former Afghan prime minister say, American troops were choppering in ISIS in Afghanistan. We have all these credible people saying this. There's no conspiracy theory. And so I was thinking that at some point they would bus in jihadis to Central Asia. The Russians have been talking about this for years. And so, maybe that attack in Kazakhstan was, the U.S. trying something, or, and as you're saying now, they're moving on from Afghanistan. So maybe you'll start seeing in Central Asia more jihadis begin to appear, because that's like the old modus operandi,
Yeah. When I talked to Issa Bloomy, I think our most recent interview, we were talking about Turkey. And he talked about a lot of things that Turkey did sort of behind the scenes. But he basically said that Turkey did all the negotiations with the stand countries. So maybe that's why Erdogan is so confident right now, or seems extra confident right now. Although he's been under a lot of pressure, but that's a whole nother topic. I'm not trying to take us off on that thing, but it's just a thought. But like, what this summit between Biden and Putin, do you have any ideas, or have any of your guests had any ideas about what the real issues are that they're going to talk about?
I mean, I haven't covered it with lately with guests. We've been talking a lot about Great Reset and cancel culture and some other things. I was reading Pepe Escobar, who was saying Russia recently had their annual St. Petersburg meeting, SPIF, which like 5,000 people attended, and he was considering that Russian SPIF to be SPIF, I don't know how you pronounce it, that to be like one of the more important meetings rather than like the NATO summits. And I mean, part of it is just usual diplomacy, right? I studied at the Geneva School of Diplomacy, and so that's just going through the motions, maybe, and at least one thing is to prevent escalation. To do these kinds of things is number one, to prevent escalation. As you said, I was thankful nothing happened on the border with Ukraine recently. That was just like I was wondering that could have gone anywhere. So I don't know. I don't have it too much more.
Yeah, I was wondering why he relaxed, or he pulled back on the Nord Stream sanctions, and this big article that came out about wanting base. I just wonder if he's gonna try to cut a deal to set up some bases in one of the border countries in Afghanistan. If that might be, I don't know. It doesn't seem like big enough. Not like it would be one of the high level issues, but it's one of their immediate problems, if you will. But the Great Reset, you've done a lot of work on that, and you find it like you're taking it seriously, right? I mean, I certainly am. There are certain people who say, well, it's failing. In fact, I've heard a lot of people talk about how they think it's flopping, it's failing right now. I do just wonder, like, why did they put a Nazi-like figure out in the front of that?
Because it has roots in this eugenicist Nazi ideology, literally. And again, some people can suspend their disbelief. I know there's people from the left, from the right, who are not religious. Again, I kind of view this as Bible prophecy, because Bible prophecy talks about a global dictatorial system at some future point. And most people have heard Revelation 13. You can't buy or sell unless you submit to the system. Basically, there's all kinds of symbolism, but basically it boils down: you won't be able to buy or sell if you don't submit to the system. And so if we saw, and this was interesting, someone pointed out, you go back to the Roman Empire, the Romans had something called the libellus, which was this certificate where you were forced to sacrifice to pagan gods. And if you didn't, in order to get this certificate from the Roman government, you would be jailed or put to death. So that was, and then it said that some of the Christians back then would get some of their friends to get them these certificates, or they would be put to death. And then that's kind of like the same theme running throughout history. And as I mentioned before, the Nazis had these, again, these types of kind of certificates to verify your purity. And these were only for the Nazi party members, so it hadn't been rolled out for everyone yet. And so I talked with Edwin Black, the same companies that were involved with the Nazis. IBM developed the technological solutions for the Nazis. They're the same ones creating this COVID passes now.
IBM created the New York Excelsior program, right? I think they did.
I think they were involved. Yeah. And again, the Rockefellers were involved with backing the Nazi regime, and they're the same ones now involved with the COVID stuff. I was forgetting, though, one of your questions about the Great Reset, or that I'm taking it seriously. It's like, how can you not? You can literally feel the restrictions now. I can't travel. I've never taken a COVID test. I don't want to. Why? I'm healthy. Why do I need to take a COVID test? Why don't I take a Ebola and chikungunya test and HIV? Why? I don't want to. And so I can't travel now. And then you see all these other things coming down in Mexico now. I mentioned this before. They've passed a law where now you're going to have to register your biometric, your nationality, name, address, biometric data to use a mobile. Otherwise, you can't use a mobile.
Really?
The banks in Mexico now have turned down geolocation. So if you log in to your computer on your smartphone, you cannot log in unless you turn on your geolocation so they know exactly where you are on the planet. So you see all of these little restrictions coming in. And like, for me, that's the Great Reset. And so it's just like, and they tried to do in Mexico City, they tried to do the QR codes last year. And the good thing is Mexicans were like, I'm not scanning a QR code to go into the shops. And then a week later, the government's like, oh, just kidding. We'll drop the QR code thing. So there was pushback, but I don't doubt they're going to be coming back again. So it's just like,
these are relentless kind of people, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I take it seriously too. I just wonder why they put somebody like Klaus Schwab out in front of it. And, why the shocking opening thing that everybody remembers. Everybody remembers you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Anybody who's ever forgotten that statement? I don't. I mean, I don't know.
I think, well, what I mentioned before, there's a large portion of the public who don't even, I would say most people don't even know who Klaus Schwab is. I mean, think about it. Like all the daily people that I know, like whether in Mexico or US or Kazakhstan, they don't know who Klaus Schwab is. They don't even know what the World Economic Forum is. And you know what I'm saying? And so they have no clue. People just don't have a clue. And I found that there's only a few people that really know, like us, that are talking about this. And most people are just going along. And that's what happens in the totalitarian regimes. I've talked about this before, that it was no mystery, why Germans went along with the Nazi regime, or Russians with the Soviet regime, or Italians with the Mussolini's regime. That's just basic, psychology. It happens, and we're seeing it happen now. People just go along to get along.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the more shocking thing was how many people are putting peer pressure on other people. Yeah, that's the really disappointing thing. The thing that you mentioned about the biblical prophecies and things like that, do you think that anything that's built into there to actually send signals to, I don't know that much about evangelicals who, I don't even know about the different branches and the whatever people are called who think the apocalypse is coming and don't think that's a bad thing, right? So are there signals embedded in that for people who sort of would welcome the apocalypse?
There are people that like maybe that want to bring it about. And I don't think it's just in Christianity. There might be parts in Islam as well, right? And I don't know, in Judaism, perhaps as well, that they want to bring it about. I mean, there are definitely these strains, especially this like neocon strain, right? And in this, I will call it fake Christianity in America. It's called big evangelicalism, right? It's like this fake plastic mainstream Christianity that are not anti-war, or because I think the biblical Christian. And I did an interview a month or two ago with the Canadian pastor that was being put in prison, and he had the same point. We don't want these things to happen. We try to fight them because it's evil, right? War is evil. These control systems are evil, and our duty is to fight evil however you see it.
I mean, if you're following Christ, right, he wanted you to be like him, right?
Right. You want to fight evil. It's like, I don't want it to come. That's why I'm angry. That's why I'm angry. That's why I'm doing this podcast. Yeah, and this may be inevitable. And well, I mean, we do believe it's inevitable. It's coming. That's why I have this near-term pessimistic view that this is coming and you can't stop it, but you can like slow it down. And it is your duty to fight evil, even if it's like a huge wave that is going to swallow you, but you'd be a coward to not do anything,
like a dilemma or a paradox or something. Yeah. I don't know. I think we've entered like the realm of surreal. Things happen all the time that I look across my partner and say, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. And we do this probably about once a week. But I've also run into people who are younger and like don't have a big issue with the Chinese social credit system. And from their perspective, the reason why it's tolerated by the population and they're not worried about it is because they value security over privacy. And my question was, well, is that, do you have, is that a binary choice? Or do you have to accept a social, a total surveillance system and a totalitarian, or at least an extremely authoritarian system in order to have security? It doesn't seem to me like you do, but that was their way of looking at it. That if everybody's fairly comfortable and uh, there's no crime when you have systems like this, they're okay with that. They're thinking maybe that is a better system.
I don't think these people understand the nature of evil and history and these kinds of systems. I mean, just to live in such a system where for any arbitrary reason, they could just turn you off. And I think a lot of these people that think they're going to be okay, they could have some of their accounts turned off. And that's what's happened in past history of totalitarian systems. There were people who in the Soviet Union, or whatever example you want to use in the past, did nothing wrong, yet they were sent, wherever, to the gulag or to the camp. So if you know that has happened before, how can you be okay with a social credit system? And I don't understand these kids that are. I posted today this article about Kazakhstan on my Facebook, and some of my former students are mocking me, liking it, hearts, like, awesome social credit, because they're the scientists and the vaccines are great, and this is to solve the vaccine problem. I'm like, what planet do you know history? Like, you might very well be locked out of the system at some future point, right? Even,
Yeah, and well, there's something else, and you saw it all through the pandemic system. And of course, it's a tactic that I think is used, but the indoctrination, along with it, comes instilling a sense of superiority. Like, I'm smarter, I know better. Oh, those deplorable. You saw it in the Trump years. So if you accept these things, you do it from a position of superiority, and I think that makes it even more difficult to question anything. Is when you have been told that you're the noble one, you're the smart one, you're the more elite one. I think, ironically, it makes it easier to get people to go along with things, or to blind them, if you will.
I
But
call it.
I'm not a psychologist, so
I call it indoctrination, brainwashing. Oh, I think it was Denny Rancourt or someone that recently tweeted that, it's the educated classes that are the problem. They've been miseducated. You talk to the blue collar people, and more of them know what's going on. And I recall at university, when I was teaching at university, I was with a few dozen of the international relations students. We were with one of the directors of the IR department and a guest speaker for the IR conference. And this was like 2016, right? When it was, still Hillary Clinton and Trump. I don't remember if Trump won or it was right before the election, and then I didn't vote. I preferred maybe Trump because he's more conservative, but I still cannot bring myself to vote for Trump. And for me, he's proven to be like, he never complied with anything that he did. And I mean, if you really were going to go against the system and go out like John F. Kennedy, right? Or Robert F. Kennedy, or don't play the game, right? And so these students who are the upper educated class, they were, I guess you would classify them as liberals. They were all for Hillary. And I was like the only person not for Hillary, like kind of for Trump because he's conservative, but I wasn't not a big fan of Trump. And they all agreed that they said if they could cheat to get Hillary in and get Trump out, they would do that.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, what? Like, for me, if Hillary won fair and square, okay, I don't like her,
Yeah.
but whatever. I'm not even gonna think about her for 4 years. I'm not gonna be crying about Hillary. Okay, like Biden now. Biden is the president. I don't like Biden. I don't think about him every day. It's like I go on with my life, but to hear from this class, this is corruption.
Yeah, and never the recognition that there'll be blowback, that it'll come and bite you in the ass. Yeah, this is a constant problem on the so-called left in recent years. Just the ends justify the means, with absolutely no insight, no sophisticated thinking, or acknowledgement that this is going to be turned around and used on you dumbasses. They don't care. I don't know what I don't know why. There's a whole section of the left and the independent who does, educated people to that somehow escaped that mentality. Generally, it was the pro Bernie crowd or the pro Tulsi crowd. Although, Bernie just sold out too. So we're talking about the Bernie that was back in 2016 who seemed fairly genuine. So, yeah, but that's a really good point that you make. I don't understand that mentality. It's almost like a corporate quarterly profit mentality. It's, what, as long as it works for right now, I'm good with it. They have no, either that or it's just whatever they call the TDS syndrome, just this derangement. Some people are talking about mass psychosis, things like that, and things that have really not just throwing that term out, like there have been real examples of mass psychosis, like the one that's always used, the witches in Salem, that kind of thing.
Or COVID now.
Yeah, what is it, the COVIDians or whatever?
The branch COVIDians.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's continue this conversation. We kind of gone on for a little longer than we planned, maybe. But anything else that you want to do before we wrap up, or?
No, I think we've gone a long time, and maybe the next time we can
we'll
continue.
Zero in on a more topic. Yeah, I'd love to do it again. Yeah, just but we'll be more specific. This is sort of an intro to maybe we'll do some more Swapcasts in the future. Yeah. I'd love to.
And I'd say, check out aroundtheempire.com, check out Geopolitics and Empire.com. I think we overlap a lot. We have a lot of similar guests. I think you're more to the left, I'm more to the right, but I talk to everyone, and no respecter of persons. Everyone is on the same level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly the same way, and more so all the time. In fact, I'm going out of my way to talk to people who aren't aligned with me exactly, because I think it's a good thing to do, especially now. It's even more important than ever. And I certainly don't want to become, an indoctrinated, sort of narrow-minded person. That's the worst thing that could happen. And also, there's just so many voices out there that they get no platform. Like, so many really smart, interesting people to talk to. I'm constantly amazed at people who I talk to, and then people who I hear on podcasts like yours and lots of others. I mean, it's shocking that we have this massive media system and none of these people are ever on it. It's just shocking to me.
Yeah, one of my shticks is I'm trying to find people no one's talked to. Like, there will people say listeners will say, why don't you talk to this guy, like, who's popular now, and he's given 100 interviews, and I'm like, well, I'm going to ask him the same questions. You can just go watch the past 50 interviews he's done, so I'm going to see, who is a really smart person that no one is interviewing. So
yeah, I think that's great. I really do. And like, just to reiterate, if you like one of these podcasts, you'll probably like the other one, because we have the same interests, the same a very similar mentality in certain ways, even if we don't line up politically, which is less and less important to me, is how somebody lines up politically. Let's just talk. I
Well,
wish
we
we
don't
could go
have
back to that.
we don't even have to say line up politically. I think in values, right? Like
Yeah.
if we're against the negative aspects of empire, right? Whether it's war or theft or corporations that are creating these artificial inequalities, right? Like all of these things. So let's talk more values in that sense, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great answer. You put it much better. All right. Well, it was great talking to you, and hope to talk to you again soon.
All right. Until next time.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Special thanks to Hrvoje. Follow him at Geopolitics_EMP. Subscribe to the Geopolitics and Empire podcast on podcast apps, on YouTube, Odyssey, and other platforms, and find the website at geopoliticsandempire.com. This podcast is independent media. Listener support's really important. Rockfin.com/AroundTheEmpire, Patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire, PayPal.me/AroundTheEmpirePod. You can find this podcast any mobile podcast app, on the website AroundTheEmpire.com, on Rockfin, Patreon, YouTube, and soon to be on Odyssey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also follow on Twitter at AroundTheEmpire, and we'll see you next time. Take good care, everybody.